today's digital age where the flow is really fast, you cannot react to a problem. You have to be well prepared for it.
You were obviously working some of the blue chip companies out there, and what inspired you to take the entrepreneurial plunge? I mean, it wasn't high pressure enough for you. You needed some more.
A rocket won't go up without pressure. You may choose to stay silent. Silent is also a great communication strategy. With respect to working women, I'm referring to. Number one, that our willingness to quit is the biggest problem.
Right.
Right? We are very ready to give up our career.
So, good evening and welcome to yet another edition of Thinkly Talks. Today, we are in conversation with Mitu Samar. Mitu's impressive career includes leadership roles at CRISIL, Standard & Poor's, Aditya Birla Capital, ICICI Prudential. She is currently the CEO of Eminence Strategy Consulting, which she set up somewhere in 2014, and really leverages her over 2 decades of brand positioning and reputation management expertise to empower organizations and individuals. Mitu also serves as an independent director on the boards of Times Internet, Times Guarantee, and Sri Digvijay Cement. And previously, she was on the board of Aegon Life Insurance and Jungli Pictures. So with that, welcome to the talk, Mitu. How are you doing this evening?
Very well, always. Thank you, Vivek. How are you?
Very good, yeah. So great to have you here, Mitu. And, why don't we just start by, really understanding your journey, what were the choices that you made as you, went along? How much of this was, what should I say, coincidences, accidents, and how much of it was something that you kind of was self-determined? Yeah.
I would say 90% of it was coincidence. And in fact, 90% also is actually quite a low number. Most part of life is coincidence, right? It's a combination of things that keep happening to you. But most important thing is that how do you respond to them? Because while you cannot, control the circumstances or the events around you, what you can truly control is, your response to them. And that's been one of my guiding principles, and that has really helped me in good stead. So everything right from choosing to even work was not a plan. I was born and brought up in a family, or in a society rather, where broadly we were given to understand that do your best in your education. So whatever you're doing, do your best. So that was the underlying message always. But do your best in your studies. But remember that your primary role is to take care of your family. So if your career comes in the way of taking care of your family, then you should know your choices. So we were very clear when we were being brought up with this understanding. And but I haven't even taken single day's break in the last 25 years of my career.
Wow. Wow.
So yeah, that's why I keep believing that it's just coincidences, or the way circumstances pan out around you more than coincidences, but and how you respond to them.
Right. So, how did you really choose, which should I say, reputation management as a key source that you wanted to kind of double down, because obviously the whole part of communications is kind of wide, and, within that, I think you double down that and you built expertise around that. So could you just kind of help us understand where does this fit in the overall, should I say, the communication architecture, and why that?
So reputation, I would say, is the primary food or fodder for an organization to stay in business over a long period of time. This is the core belief through which we operate. So if you would observe, organizations are spending a lot of time, effort, and money in a variety of ad campaigns and loud messages around them. Now, what it does, Vivek, for sure, that it brings organizations into the consideration set. Because if I were to say, for example, buy a TV, then I know the 3 brands that I would look at. when it comes to purchasing of that television set. So a brand very clearly gets to be a part of the consideration set because of this recall.
Mhm.
But what happens is the move from consideration set to the conversion set and the loyalty thereafter
Mhm.
happens only if the company has great reputation.
Right.
And that reputation comes from the experience that it leaves with its end users, the kind of feedback and the word of mouth, promotion about the company happens. So all that. So a lot of organizations are focusing on campaigns.
Mhm.
Very few of them are focusing on experiences that they are leaving behind. And
Mhm.
if that equation gets, fine tuned, reputation will really help organizations bring about loyal, not just customers, but employee base, investors, lenders, and all other stakeholders. So that's the area we identified as a gap.
Mhm.
And we thought, why not work in this specific area?
Interesting. And in an organization or in an enterprise, where would the CXO for reputation management sit? Would it be something that would be housed under the CMO? Would it be somebody under the CRO? Should it be something that's closer, let's say, to the CEO? Because obviously there are multiple stakeholders. You have your consumers, you have your investors, employees. So, what do you really recommend on that side?
So it's an independent role. It is not a part of a particular department because
Mhm.
it's combining all the departments. So
Mhm.
the experience an organization is leaving behind with its employees, whether current or potential,
Mhm.
at the end of the day funnels up to this role, right? While it is of course
Right.
the primary responsibility of the HR department, but it will roll up there. Similarly, the organization, the way it is leaving experience with its end users or consumers.
Mhm.
So again, your sales and marketing team becomes critical here. The
Right.
next leg is how the organization is engaging with its vendors, right? So your procurement team comes in here.
Right.
The whole strategy of how to even position the organization so that maybe investors get interested in it, and good quality, large scale financial institutional investors invest in the organization. So that's
Right.
the investor relations team logging in here. So it's reputation is not like a one department responsibility.
Right.
Reputation is actually an outcome of everything that an organization does. So it
Right.
cannot be housed as a particular role in a particular team. It's
Right.
a department in itself.
Right. So do you see organization now probably looking at, let's just call it a CRO in that of sorts, like the way you had maybe 10 years back, chief digital officers coming up as a role, chief AI officers people are talking about. Are you seeing that transformation happening? And if so, could you name some either in India or abroad where you see that happening?
In fact, there's this whole role of chief risk officer,
Right.
which has become very prominent in organizations, and
Right.
somewhere this role could roll into that role,
Yeah.
right? Because what is reputation all about? Reputation is all about identifying the risks that could
Right.
emanate from variety of functions and addressing them timely, and also having functions around it so that it yields a great experience. So to a great extent, if it was to roll into a conventional role, or I would say the already existing role, then the chief risk officer, though both of them start with the R, that's the place to be. But a
Right.
lot of organizations are now taking this as an independent role.
Right.
Sometimes it also rolls into a strategy
Mhm.
role as well. So, and boards, they are taking it very seriously because reputational risk also has a reflection on or the repercussion for the board as well. So
Mhm.
that's another area where this role is becoming very, very popular globally, and of course in India, with so many episodes happening which are impacting which are resulting into crisis and impacting the reputation of the organization.
Right.
Both have also become very, very closely associated with this
Right.
aspect.
No, it's fascinating you mentioned this could be under the chief risk officer because if you normally look, in the previous years, I started off my career in advertising, and I was with JWT and Group M. And what you would have probably thought that this would be something that would sit with the corporate PR team, because you're reacting to the typically a big risk really is about really about what's happening to the brand or the corporate reputation out there, right? And they're managing it on a daily basis. But it's fascinating to see, with that you can kind of imagine this to be under the CRO, there's
Yes,
officers, right?
yes. It's predominantly, it's most fitted there because
Mhm.
reputational risk is one of the biggest risk an organization faces in today's day and age. And
Right,
it cannot be handled through a PR tactic and
right,
unfortunately in our country or in across the globe also, the way PR is looked upon is that getting some five news media coverages.
right.
So that's anyway very microscopic way of looking at PR as well, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So if you, yeah, but this is a very, very strategic role, and it's a risk that can wipe off an organization's existence itself. And like I said, in today's digital age, where the flow is really fast, you cannot react to a problem.
Right,
You
right.
have to be well prepared for it. So you have to identify your risk. You have to have your risk mitigation mechanisms in place, and address them proactively. And risks associated with poor consumer experience itself is a huge
Mhm.
risk, but unfortunately we house that under customer experience team.
Right. Any examples that you could share, maybe without taking the client's name, any interesting example that you had, or a challenge that came about, and what did you all do to kind of deal with that?
In fact, talking about this whole preparation itself,
Mhm.
right? So increasingly, what we are realizing, Vivek, is organizations are reaching out to us. They are telling us that why don't you help me identify the parameters that can act as reputational risk?
Right.
And we create a laundry list of about 100, 200 such scenarios, and then we zero them down to about 20 prominent scenarios.
Wow.
We then do a walkthrough of all those scenarios,
Mhm.
and then create a response mechanism because like I just mentioned that the flow of information is so fast that you can't take a night also to respond. You
Right,
have to respond quickly. Even if your response is that I have noticed this problem has occurred, please allow us some time to investigate and come back to you. But the
right.
organization is listening.
Mm.
That message has to go out to people. Right. So we
Right.
recently also saw one risk that came about, late in the evening of a Tuesday. But by
Mhm.
the time the organization responded by was Wednesday evening, by then they had completely lost
Mm.
control of the narrative. So,
Yes.
and after that, how many corrective actions you may do, you have lost the control of narrative. And
Right,
like you started with your introduction itself, that the troll media is getting quite rewarded.
right,
And not really citizen journalism, but citizen activism has
correct.
really become very significant.
Right.
So organizations have to really be very conscious. We are working with one of the very large manufacturing setup in the country. And
Mhm.
again, we've helped them identify these risk parameters. Something
Mhm.
as simple as the raw material that they are saying. So one of the risks that the reputational challenges that they faced, Vivek,
Mhm.
was the raw material that they were sourcing.
Mhm.
The quality of that raw material was very different from the claims that they were making to their own consumer customers, that
Okay.
we get raw materials from XYZ country, but they were not from that country. They were from relatively suboptimal quality. And
Right,
eventually that got identified, and they were blacklisted by large corporates globally. So it was
right,
a huge risk that they faced. And then there was this whole realization that
right,
we need to be well prepared for in advance. So like this, there are many examples.
right. I mean, seems like a high pressure job, and I think some of the impact would obviously be the CEO itself, right? I mean, as you were speaking, I was thinking about, I think, the PR nightmare that Google faced some time back, when they launched the Gemini,
Yeah.
and it was spewing out content which was obviously very so and so to say woke, and it wasn't necessarily accurate. And that's what you expect a LLM model to throw out there. It was showing, for example, black people being part of the Nazi army or the German army in World War II, women
Correct.
fighters, and they were all obviously untrue. When their alignment team had done that, it was so bad that they actually had to pull the product
Pull
off,
it
and
back.
people were actually saying that Sundar Pichai is on borrowed time. Then it again takes me back to, I think, somewhere in late 90s, where I think Cadbury's had the issue about, the worms in the Cadbury and stuff
Yeah.
like that, right? Johnson, for example, never recovered from the talcum
Correct.
powder, right? So these would be, I would imagine,
British
some.
Petroleum is another one, right? Which is where you talked about CEO and he when he said that I'm so tired of this ongoing crisis, I also need a break, and that statement itself was not well received, right? And he had to undergo so much of flack. So it's a very very high pressured scenario, as you rightly pointed out.
Very interesting. And, you were obviously working some of the blue chip companies out there. And
Yeah.
what prompted you, what inspired you to take the entrepreneurial plunge? I mean, it wasn't high pressure enough for you. You needed some more.
In fact, I enjoy pressure because
Okay.
I believe that pressure lets you take off, right? Like a rocket.
Mhm.
A rocket won't go up without pressure. So pressure is essential, of course. The degree of that pressure is very, very important. So if you can't handle it, then you better know your ability to take that pressure.
Mhm.
But yeah, as far as I am concerned, in my personal space, I think I thrive when I work in challenging environment, and it's good fun. So what made me choose entrepreneurship? Um, was the ability to influence multiple organizations than just limiting myself to one organization, because I
Right.
really felt the cause that I'm working on is a systemic challenge that one needs to plug,
Right.
and it was not a particular organization's challenge. And secondly, it enables me to, as an employer now, it enables me to foster a work culture that I always dreamt of.
In fact, when you were talking about those 100, 200 risk elements that you identified, it was taking me back to a few years back when, I was running this fintech company, a mobile payments company, Zipcash, where we had to actually do the CISA audit, which is really so, which
Correct.
was comprehensive. And, me and, my co-founder, we felt that we were living from one CISA audit to another, because the amount of risk that would come up and the
Correct.
time it would take you to kind of identify that and to kind of mitigate that. And by the time it was would something like a CISA audit also be would this be a more overarching type, or how would you see that happening? I'm just curious because
Yeah, yeah.
I'm thinking like this. I can see PR nightmares being one thing,
Correct.
organizational nightmares, systemic risk, because the moment you said systemic risk, and that's what RBI was always worried about,
Correct.
right? Stuff like that.
So
So
we don't operate in the regulatory risk space, right?
okay.
Of course, there exists expertise and but when you advise anybody on the regulatory risk,
Hmm.
to the technical detail, you
Hmm.
need to have that technical capability, and every industry has its own nuance. So we
Hmm.
do not come with that level of technical expertise. So
Hmm.
when it comes to details of, say, an IRDA or a SEBI or RBI kind of very, very specific regulatory risk framework that they speak of,
Hmm.
that's something we don't double click on that. What we take care of is identify that regulatory risk can come to you because
Right.
you operate in an industry which is highly regulated. So when say for example, just for the example's sake, if I am advising an ICICI bank versus
Hmm.
if I'm advising PVR Inox,
Right.
the regulatory framework of the two organizations are very different. While of
True.
course PVR has its own uh, you know, it has its own framework of guidelines in which the entertainment industry operates, and one will need to be mindful of that. But the regulatory challenges that a bank faces is of
Right.
another magnitude. And
Right.
we are not expert in that. Like you said, there are expert agencies that exist there. What we do is we highlight that such risks exist and you
Right.
have to address.
Great stuff. I can really imagine the amount of value you must be adding to all the boards where you're an independent director, because I think just sensitizing the boardroom about the
Yes.
possible, issues and possible conflicts and the reputational exposure that they have, I think is probably a good point. And at this, I'll just take a question here from Vinod. He's saying that in your experience as a board member, how do you ensure that corporate governance aligns with business strategy, with business market needs, and especially during market shifts? I think this would be extremely pertinent when you sometimes have the CEO or the board really obsess about growth, typically. And I think here you are trying to, in some ways, rein them in, right? So would love your thoughts and observation that you've come across.
Um, I have exposure to about six boards by now.
Hmm.
And very, very confidently, I can say that board is not just focused on growth, right?
Nice.
Board is very, very, very conscious about the fact that it has to be a scenario, it has to be a responsible growth scenario. It can't
Hmm.
simply be growth scenario.
Nice.
That's point number one. And hence it enables organizations to also develop holistically and not just with a singular focus of, the bottom line.
And you've seen this shift changing over the last few years, or you always
Yes.
felt that,
It,
yeah.
it definitely has changed because the risk that independent directors or directors on board personally also carry, right?
Hmm.
Because of the conduct of the organization,
Hmm.
is also high. So, one cannot afford to take that risk and look away from lack of corporate governance practices or lack of general responsible business practices, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so there is a vested interest personally also, but more importantly, because when you join boards, the role that you play is that of a more of like a sounding board, right? Who will help the management team, come up with ideas, come up with observations, come up with roles and execution, which are not just profit led. And hence it hence becomes very, very responsible role, and really helps you to develop a very holistic picture. So at least the boards that I have been on, or the fellow board members that I talk to, always what we have observed is each of us are concerned about how organization is growing more in a more systemic manner, in a more holistic manner, than just focusing on the top line or the bottom line.
It's very encouraging to hear that, because I think responsible growth is it's
Yes,
pretty much, I mean, having focusing on the three lines, the bottom line, top line, and of course the social line, if I may say, like, is
correct.
I think becoming more and more important.
Yes.
But what do you see really when you, do you engage with startups, and what do you see their mindset? Because obviously startups are in a very different phase, and they kind of some of them are really sometimes pushing the regulation, they're sometimes pushing the envelope in terms of growth. And what has been your experience, if at all, with the startups?
I would say it's the mindset issue that we feel that startups are pushing the envelope. Even large corporates, and we hear them in the headlines also often,
Right.
that they're also pushing the envelope. So it will be unfair to label a particular category of the industry or the ecosystem, saying that they are more vulnerable to, break rules. In fact, I would say that they are more cautious because they know that there is no cushion and there is
Right.
no track record that is going to back them.
Right.
My experience has been that startups, meaningful size, we are not talking about mom and pop shops kind of thing, which is opened yesterday. And anyway, we do not really engage much with smaller size organizations. But I would say the MSME segment and largely the SME part of it primarily, um, they are not really out there to break rules. Nobody is operating with that kind of a mindset.
Right.
Everybody wants to do business and
Mhm.
do it well. Um, Having said this, are there no black sheeps? There are, and in the smaller corporate worlds also, as well as the reverse is also true in the large corporate world. So
Right.
one has to be mindful of that,
Mhm.
and operate accordingly. And it's not really only startup world challenge that they are trying to push the envelope.
So I would imagine that, these risk issues, they start off somewhere in the organization because of maybe a culture issue, maybe like you said, a sourcing issue or something like that. But eventually it usually end up becoming a PR nightmare, right? Because that when it
It
explodes,
becomes
and
public.
it
Yeah.
becomes public, right? And I think then you are pretty much just trying to react because there's nothing that you can do to preempt that, right? In many ways, right? In fact, there's a question here from Varun. He's saying with evolving consumer expectations, and also I would imagine the social media, how do you foresee the role of communication leaders transforming over the next few years, particularly in a digital first world? Because I think most of the time the news breaks on the social media first. And any thoughts on that? What's the kind of training that you encourage, let's say the corporate communication team of an enterprise or the PR teams to kind of engage in, or any other such observations on that note?
In the digital world, I would say the sensitization is required for the entire organization and the C-suite, and
Hmm.
not just the comms and the PR or the marketing team.
Right.
Because, like you rightly pointed out, unfortunately, they become a part of everything when the episode has happened,
Yeah.
right? But rest of the people are aware of the situation happening as it is unfolding, or even before that, that there exists a possibility of a risk
Right.
unfolding. So it's important that the sensitization is done across the organization, and we do host a lot of risk sensitization workshops for our clients also, and help them understand that what seems to them as business as usual
Mm-hmm.
is no longer just that, because the information flow is in nanoseconds, number one, and boundaryless, number two. So
Mm-hmm.
very, very critical that you act quickly. And for you to be able to act quickly, you have to A, know that this is risky, and B, what would you do if it were to happen, right? Like
Right.
I get reminded of the episode on United Airlines, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a typical business practice that if the airline is overbooked, they offer people to get off and they compensate them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you recall that whole episode where they pulled out a doctor
Yeah.
and got video recorded, and it became like a major reputational challenge for the whole
Yeah.
organization. It had reflections on its share price, it had reflection on the career of the CEO, all of
Right.
it, right?
Right.
So it's no longer a PR department or a marketing department's role. It's
Right.
actually a C-suite challenge. They
Right.
need to be sensitized about it. So that's
Right.
point number one. And point number two is that, okay, fine, now the mistake has happened, or the crisis has hit the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Important it is that organization, and this is where the comms team, communication team's role comes in, that it is important that they acknowledge the situation and address it by saying that what are they doing to contain it, or what are they
Right.
doing to ensure that it is not going to happen again in future. So
Mm-hmm.
a quick holding statement is necessary, followed by a detailed action plan that could go on. And crafting of that
Mm-hmm.
is a skill that everybody must learn.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, the language of legal team, or
Mm-hmm.
the whole being legally correct, the
Right.
compulsion of being legally correct
Right.
overtakes, because it's an organization. They have to be very, very mindful of it, right?
Correct.
So the statements, while they are very, very technically right, they
Mm.
end up being tone deaf.
Right.
They end up being emotionless.
Right.
And that is where this whole citizen activism then takes over,
Right.
right? Because when crisis scenarios, organizations have to understand that is an
Mm.
emotional scenario. Your
Absolutely.
statement cannot be devoid of emotions.
Right.
So
Right.
these are nuances that organizations need to be mindful of. And the
Right.
third aspect they need to be mindful of is timeliness.
Mm.
That you can't take forever to draft one statement and come out. One important aspect is you may choose to
Mm.
stay silent. Silent
Mm.
is also a great communication strategy,
Right.
right? So, but be mindful of that and do it well. And these are certain skill sets that
Mm.
comms team, legal team, the C-suite, all of them
Mm.
need to learn. Very
Right.
impactful.
I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm learning so much, and I think anybody who's listening in, anybody worried about facing a crisis, I mean, you know who the person you should be calling out there, right? I mean,
Thank you.
but let's just I would love to just do some kind of a role play. You're on the board of the most watched company right now, which is OpenAI. You're on the board of that company for exactly this role that you're in. And they've been having what should I say, a PR nightmare since the last 1 year, right? After all the lovely ChatGPT launches, because last year there was this what should I say, Sam Altman was thrown out, and then he kind of made his way back in, I think around 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. And then of course Ilya Sutskever, he left a few weeks back to start, 3 months back to start his own company. He was one of the
Yeah.
co-founders.
Opa.
Just last week, Mira, basically the CTO left, and then Greg seems to be on absent leave, and the other co-founder left. And then Sam has always, kind of been doing a lot of virtue signaling, talking about the fact that, he's got zero stakes in the company. It seems now the company is going to move from a not-for-profit to profit. And then he's actually going to be having 7% stake, which is going to be worth a $10 billion. That's a little, what should I say, rich money for somebody who said he's got zero stake in the company. All of it happens together. And now they're in the market trying to raise, at a $150 billion valuation, probably around $7 billion, which is going to be one of the largest fundraise ever. And at the same time, these three, people, what should I say, decide to quit, and they all come up with a statement that, this just seems to be the right time to do, I mean, it just smells of a PR disaster of sorts. And people have had very different takes on how that should have been orchestrated. Any thoughts, reaction, if you're familiar with the situation? I mean, what should he have done otherwise? Now, because he's down, he's down from 4, 5, what should I say, co-founders to one. There's obviously is a crisis out there. He's moving from a non-profit to profit, the perfect storm happening. So your thoughts on that?
People leaving your team and that to your A team is a common phenomena. We saw that for Meta also, if you recall, in the earlier days.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And
Made
there
a good movie.
so, yes, and then there are many such examples of established companies where there is a disagreement, or maybe out of choice, people are choosing to leave the founding team, so to say, and then parallelly. Other business growth plans are happening, or so to say, this choice to move from non-profit for profit kind of a situation. So there are multiple dimensions, and honestly, in a what do you say, hastily, one wouldn't really want to give any specific recommendation to them. But what my 2 cents, again, since it's a hypothetical situation, would be that in such a day and age, it's very, very critical to communicate. Where the confusion happens is, हो क्या रहा है वहाँ पे? What's
Yeah,
going, what's happening? And if you let that fester for too long, that's where
the
doubts
problem then.
start coming in. So
Yeah.
my immediate response to them would be that they could be slightly more communicative, slightly more open. Fortunately, digital media offers you owned media space, like we call in our marketing
Yeah.
parlance, and that is your own space. Leverage X, leverage LinkedIn, leverage Insta, whichever, and use that as your mouthpiece, and tell about your thought process, your as in Sam Altman's thought process, Using that platform, it gives you a voice. Then there'll be detractors, there'll be trolls, but then when you become meaningful, these are the signs that you become meaningful, right? When you
That's a
a
great
lot
way.
of people troll.
Reputation risk comes along with the success of the company
Vivek,
in
what
that sense.
doesn't come with a price tag? Everything comes with a price tag, right?
That is true.
That's the price tag, fame
Right,
brings, the
right.
reputational risk. You have to tread the path very carefully.
Great points, Mitu. And I think just on this, just shifting gears a bit, just wanted to explore some of the other facets of your experience. So you've also been a certified leadership coach, and I think you've worked with leaders across the organization at apparently at different levels. So any thoughts about what are the common issues that you're seeing leaders struggle with in today's day and age? I mean, is it about the way the organizations are, about the newer workforce which is coming, and any such sort? I mean, could you just kind of dwell on that point a bit?
One common phenomena that I observe, Vivek, across is how less self-aware all of us are.
Hmm.
Right. So one challenge that and across hierarchy also, because there are some students or some, management trainee level people also generally reach out to me for some guidance. So I've seen their journeys. And of course, as a leadership coach, I engaged very actively with the C-suite. In both the levels, the challenge is that both levels are highly self-unaware, and
Right.
the every time it's somebody else's problem.
Yeah.
Uh, so I was listening to I was listening to one video, and which was very, very, I would say, enlightening for me, where it was said that circumstances in Hindi is called parasthiti,
Hmm.
right? Which is परिस्थिति, दूसरों की स्थिति. तो हम हर चीज को circumstances पे blame करते हैं, which is दूसरों के action पे blame करते हैं. A lot of times we don't reflect, we don't do self-reflection, and if we were to just do that, I feel a lot of challenges will get addressed there itself.
So I think nowadays, like I mentioned before, I've seen that the coaching has shifted a lot from Western technical skills to a lot more about knowing thyself, right? I mean, about being aware about what you are as a person, what are your passion, your values, and then probably, trying to engage with the world outside. Would you call that fair? Hmm.
Oh yeah, totally. And our scriptures, or even if I don't go by the scriptures, even if I just read, to great extent, even the Western philosophy talks
Mhm.
about similar thing, that you work on yourself first, and
Right.
that's the only thing which is in your control. There is
Absolutely.
just nothing else which is in your control. Your response, we started the conversation with that, right? That your response, how do you respond to your circumstances, is the only thing which is in your control.
Lovely. And I think that applies to so many things beyond work itself, right? Life
Correct.
happens and you need to respond in the right way. Right?
Yeah.
Great stuff. Let's move along to the other point of yours, which I think you're very passionate about, is the women empowerment. And there have been some, posts from you on that. And you've done a lot of contribution under the 100 Hours of Change initiative, right? Could you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that? And then maybe if you could just linger on the point about women in the workforce, and what are the kind of challenges you've seen, and what's the kind of guidance that you've given them?
So 100 Hours of Change actually was an initiative that was done by CII Western Region's Indian Women Network. And I
Mhm.
was a part of that initiative. And here
Mhm.
we all contributed about 100 hours of
Mhm.
our time in engaging with women
Mhm.
of different backgrounds, and helping them, stay in the workforce largely, because the end objective was to plug the leaky pipeline.
Right.
So that was the objective with which we started. And I would say, to great extent, that was my introduction to realize that different kinds of challenges women face.
Right.
Because while, of course, I myself am one, but everyone comes with a different background and a different challenge. And
Right.
like I mentioned to you right at the beginning, uh, I had no expectations from myself when I started, because this was anyway not the path I was going to tread. So I thought, whatever is coming my way, let me enjoy. While I did that, just because I had no choice, but when I look back, I think that was the best thing that could happen to me, because since I was enjoying what was coming my way, I was doing a great work. And
There
and
is something in that, what you just said. Have no expectation and enjoy the process. I mean, that's
yeah,
karm, that's a karm yoga right there, right? In that sense. But sorry,
precisely.
I had to say that, but yeah, now back to you.
Yeah, so तभी पता नहीं चला, did not realize
Yeah.
it then. But in the hindsight, I realized that, oh, what a great blessing that was.
Yeah.
So when I started engaging with these women, I realized that the two, three very common problems.
Mhm.
Number one, with respect to working women, I'm referring to. Number one,
Mm.
that our willingness to quit is the biggest problem.
Right.
Right? We are very ready to give up our career. And,
Mm.
so then the resilience to, because corporate world is full of challenges. And
Mm.
oftentimes, many women do not leave workforce because they have pressure to contribute at home. A lot of
Mm.
them quit work just because they don't want to deal with this pressure. So
Mm.
that is challenging. And we should
Mhm.
be very, very mindful.
Mhm.
What is our why
Mm.
of willingness to
Mm.
give up something so critical?
Mhm.
Because financial independence
Mm.
is the biggest, or I would say the primary criteria for happiness.
Right.
If you, and when I'm saying financial independence, I'm not referring to your being able to buy great vacations or go on a yacht or something like that. I'm not talking about luxuries. I'm
Mm.
talking about being financially independent to such extent that you don't have to depend on anybody else for your roti kapda or makan.
Right.
And when you don't have to depend on other people for this basic necessity,
Mm.
um, there is a different joy that you naturally experience in yourself. There is
Right.
a different confidence that you naturally experience in yourself, and that's very critical to that's one of the primary I would say layer to the
Mm.
whole pyramid of happiness.
Right.
Yeah, that having your finances sorted. Imagine that if you were to worry about, suppose a sickness hits me or a disease hits me, how am I going to foot the bill for the same?
Mm.
उसी डर से बीमारी हो जाती है. So
Right. Right.
having that comfort that, okay, some adversities will come my way, and it's
Mhm.
life, it will come. I am
Right.
well equipped to deal with them.
Right.
Right. So that is necessary. And a lot of times women, when they end up giving up their work, they end up losing this basic necessity of life. And um, and that sometimes might become challenging. Some
Right.
women, they choose to leave workforce, but they have good amount of savings, and then they invest that saving very prudently, and are
Mm.
still able to manage great financial freedom.
Mm.
Fantastic. Right. So, or some other women who are not in 9 to 5 or a formal workforce, but are using their passion, their hobby to earn money. That's
Mm.
also great. But
Right.
be financially independent, that's very, very critical. And a lot of us end up losing sight of that in the short term, and in the long term we regret sometimes. So that
Right.
is one big challenge for women in career. The second big challenge is, of course, the stereotypical expectations of society, that they are
Mm.
the primary caregivers.
Right.
And so whenever the family needs, it is the woman who chooses to
That's the fact.
take the back seat in her career. um, Often, unfortunately, this is self-inflicted. So
Yeah.
you know that is something we have to be very mindful of. So these are the two areas, emphasis on financial awareness and also
Mm.
knowing your worth and not so easily give up.
Right.
Are the two areas for women.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you just answered this question from Aisha, who was trying to understand what are the common barriers that really, stop the women from moving ahead. And I think one is, of course, that the whole, maybe because of the patriarchal setup, the need for financial independence is not necessarily ingrained.
Correct.
Or women don't realize the importance of that, until it unfortunately sometimes becomes too late in the day. And I think the second thing I hear you saying is the fact that, again, the patriarchal setup probably pushes this pressure on you. Sometimes it's not even there that you have to be the primary caregiver, right? And you
Correct.
end up compromising moment there is a little bit of a challenge, which in some ways men don't even think about. The one and two don't
Precisely.
exist for men, right? I mean, they
Yeah.
have to navigate that. And I think, yeah. No, very
But
interesting.
even
And
not in consideration set, Vivek. It doesn't even come in men's consideration set.
that's right. That's a
That's
great perspective. Yeah, yeah. And is that what you talk about really as the leaky pipeline of the women workforce that needs to be plugged? I mean, education, empowerment, coming kind of broadening the horizon and the thought process.
yeah,
Uh,
and a lot will depend. I think possibly next generation onwards, lot will improve on that count because many more girls or women will be more mindful of that because they themselves have experienced. They've started experiencing a certain lifestyle. Even
right.
in tier two, tier three cities, you would observe, and as a part of my offerings, as eminence, we do a lot of consumer behavior study, and we see women or girls even in tier two, tier three cities, or families which are slightly conservative in
Mm,
all kinds of setups.
mm,
There are, women who know their rights and
right.
who want to be self dependent or so on.
Mm,
Now going forward, the bigger challenge is going to be, as parents, we have to also bring up our son to to be aware of, because be aware of this change and go with that flow,
right.
because otherwise at a societal level, otherwise challenges will
Mm,
come, which we have to be again mindful of, because we don't want unhappy citizens.
right. Right. I love this next question from Alia, and she said that what's your take, therefore, on feminism? Some people, including women, feel it has done more harm than good for society. How could you respond to that? Perhaps sometimes the over calibration, over correction. So, any thoughts on that point?
So I believe in the whole concept of yin and yang. I
Mm,
believe in the concept of Ardhanarishwar, and where we need to be together, Shiva and Shakti.
right.
So the whole universe is made such that all forces are together, and we have to move in that direction. So any one gender or any one individual, and goes beyond gender, any one individual having a lesser role to play in any family, you would notice, that creates the rift, or that creates the discomfort.
Mm,
So it's not about man, it is not about woman, it is not about feminism, none of it. We
mm,
have to be, rather, I would say, it is about inclusion. We have to be more inclusive towards everybody, and move together collectively towards a common goal, instead of just saying that X is better than Y, or Y is better than Z, or uh, you know one over the other.
mm.
All of
And
us.
that, ladies and gentlemen, is a masterclass on how to handle one of these difficult questions by a chief risk officer. I mean, I can imagine, people fumbling their way through, and but jokes aside, I think, Mitu, I think most of the time, the problem we have with these kind of issues is that our non-willingness to hold two thoughts at the same time.
Yes.
The fact that yes, there is a balance, and there's obviously both sides of the story. There's a reason they're stereotyping because of the cultural baggage that we carry and everything. And you can't just ignore one for the other. It's just about trying to strike the balance, and that's probably what makes life so interesting in that sense, and challenging, I would imagine. Right?
Correct.
Yeah. Let's again shift some gears and maybe just spend a few minutes on you obviously been at the boards in those board level meetings and in the C-suite discussions, and what are you really seeing happen right now with this whole transformation? Because I think every generation believes that there are a lot of challenges up there, but I think with this whole focus on AI, the automation out there, the changing consumer behavior, the changing workforce behavior, with the Gen Z being a very different generation out there. What do you see are the challenge that we have to be really worried about when you look at the future of work? Any thoughts that you'd like to double down on?
I always look for opportunities. I think as an entrepreneur, it's in my blood to look only for possibilities and opportunities.
Mm,
So, more than challenges, I see opportunities. Um,
lovely.
and AI, automation, technology, all that, even in field like ours, right, which is very human intensive, needs a lot of consultative approach
Mhm,
than analytical approach to move towards the outcome.
mhm,
Even in fields like ours, I feel it is extremely powerful to
mhm,
have all these technology powering your
right,
activities or operations. How
right.
so? Um, like we spoke about reputation, and we spoke about reputation's primary or the bedrock is stakeholder experience and trust. if
Right.
these two if these two elements are in place, your organization's reputation or your personal reputation broadly is going to be intact.
Right.
Now, how do you now both of them are such what do you say, such intangible
Mm,
factors, right? Trust and experience, both of them are such intangible factors.
mhm,
Technology is enabling me to measure them,
right.
right? It is helping me track my user behavior, it is helping me track my team's behavior, it is helping me track or rather gather data, analyze the same, preempt their responses, all of that. In addition to that, it is also guiding me that from the emotional quotient perspective,
Mhm,
what kind of message is going to sit well
mhm,
with them, right? Of course, here we have to use our own human intelligence. We cannot do away with that. But getting some level of initial insight through these data and analytics, they really empower the communication strategy of an organization.
right.
And I look at this whole automation as extremely, not just automation, the whole advent of AI, GPTs of the world, all of
Mm.
that as a huge power that we all are getting to do our work even better and sharper.
And there's a question here from Meera along the same line saying that I would love to know how do you see the landscape of entrepreneurship evolving in the next few years? Because obviously we have these new tool sets available. So any thoughts on that?
It's only going to multiply from here, Vivek, right? Like we see all the, whether we are seeing IIM data or we are seeing IIT data or even we are seeing regular, engineering, medical, all colleges, even including medical colleges data. People are taking to entrepreneurship than a standard, role in an organization.
Mhm,
More and more number of people, of course the proportion is still smaller, but
right.
that portion is increasing or the size of pie is increasing. So
Mhm,
that is number one. And so certainly this trend is going to continue. More and more people are at least going to experiment with their career. If
right.
it works, great. If it doesn't, of course there's a fallback. So entrepreneurship is going to multiply. What is more important to notice is the sustainability of it. कंपनी
Mhm,
चालू करना बहुत आसान है,
correct.
उसको चलाना बहुत मुश्किल है.
Right.
And for that you need a lot of grit and resilience. um, Unfortunately, because of overexposure of information to us. Secondly, very very quick gratification, because मुझे अभी चाय पीनी है, I can order. अभी आइसक्रीम खाना है, I can order. So whatever I want now, it's getting to me right away, right? And I'm just talking about chai and ice cream. It can be even bigger gratification that one can think of.
Right.
But we're getting gratified very quickly, right?
Right.
I need 100 CVs for this role. I put out a LinkedIn post and I immediately get some 300 CVs. Now the challenge is sifting through those 300 CVs. Only
Right.
5 CVs out of that 300 will be relevant, right?
Right.
But to sift through 300 and you will feel great कि मैंने ad डाला and I got 300 responses, right? But the challenge is, out of those 300, only 5 are relevant. So your ability to go through those 300, spot the 5, engage with 5, out of those 5, 3 will say that, oh, I'm not interested. I just applied because it was easy apply. Option was given, mera wo button I just pressed, kind of thing, So you're only left with 2 potential candidates, out of which you may just hire one or maybe none. So, and that is frustrating because we are so used to, array, I got 300 responses and I couldn't convert any, so the grit and determination to make things work, that fine, if nobody is joining me, I'm going to dirty my hands and get this done. Or somebody rising up to the occasion and saying, Mitu, we'll do it together. All that has started becoming slightly more challenging because we are judgmental. We are so used to, not seeing any failures or not seeing no's. That whole grit and determination that is required to sustain your entrepreneurial journey goes missing many times. And that's why only, like as data says, more than 90% startups wind up.
Probably more, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
And therefore, what would be your advice to the upcoming entrepreneurs right now? If you had to give them one advice at this point.
Just one advice would be that stay put. Things will happen, but you have to have that patience, trust the process.
It's such a paradox because probably today, is probably a better time than any other time in history to do a startup because the tech stack is cheap, the mindset is there, there's so many tools available. And yet this is a generation which is so used to, like you talked about, instant gratification, that just lasting through a 8-10 year journey to build a startup is, I think, where the disconnect is happening and the frustration that comes in. Fascinating. That's a great point. I think before we move towards concluding this, a series of rapid fire questions to you. This has been put together by some of my Gen Z colleagues. So if you don't like them, it's them. But if you like the question, it's me asking you. So you know how you should think about it.
Happy to do.
All right. So let's get this going. So if you could have dinner with any entrepreneur, who would that be?
Richard Branson.
Okay, interesting. What's your go-to productivity hack?
Sleep.
Okay, so that helps you with the productivity, and therefore, what would be your favorite way to unwind after a long day? It has to be something apart from sleep now.
No, playing Ludo with my kids.
Oh, lovely. Did you pick that up during COVID? I mean, playing Ludo?
No. Yeah, we just have been playing since. Of course, my son is just 13, my daughter is 17.
Right.
But yeah, so we've been playing Ludo since many years now.
All right. Reminds me of the time we started playing Ludo, during the COVID period. We didn't have a Ludo board, so 4 of us used to sit in the room and play Ludo on the phones. It was hilarious. Okay, which app do you use the most?
WhatsApp, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, which is the second most used app for yours? Because in India, WhatsApp is a given.
I don't have any other app on my phone. Of course, I do have LinkedIn and Insta. But other than that, I have no other app on my phone. And these 2 apps are there because my work demands them to be there.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Right. And what's your guilty pleasure TV show?
I don't watch TV at all.
Okay, so what do you do when you come back home and you want to de-stress? Apart from the Ludo. You read.
I like reading. Yes, yes.
Okay. Which genre? Is it fiction, non-fiction, uh, management?
Across genres, because my favorite genre, of course, is reading romantic books by um, uh, Nicholas Sparks.
Mhm.
I just love the way he writes, but across genres. So leadership books. My again, the most favorite one is also the autobiographies um,
Mhm.
that the senior leaders or the successful entrepreneurs have written. For
Right.
example, Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, or Ride
Right.
of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. These are
Right.
some of my like absolute go-to books.
Yeah. Some amazing sage advice out there in some
Yeah.
of those. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And if you were not a reputation manager or a risk manager, what would you be doing?
Nothing else. As in, I would just be doing this. Nothing else.
Mhm.
Because, like I told you, Vivek, I didn't start with a plan. So this
Right.
became my plan. I'm pretty much this.
And one piece of advice you would give to your younger self, a 10-year younger self.
Have perspectives, or rather see perspectives.
Nice. So that's so important in today's day and age, right? Just the ability to form a worldview based on different POVs, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
There's no
Right.
one right way.
That's great. Uh, no, so I think thanks so much. And I think just moving along, when you were to kind of look back at your career, I mean, how have you kind of stayed the balance? Because obviously this high pressure, of course, you've talked about, sleep and Ludo, but still, I mean, do you have any particular productivity hack or a sanity hack to kind of, deal with it?
I think I pray every morning.
Nice.
And I think that gives me a lot of, it just clears my mind, I feel.
Hmm.
So, how much disturbed I am, Vivek,
Hmm.
or so when I'm praying, also, even with my eyes shut, I
Hmm.
can only see my work. So, so people talk about meditation and controlling their thoughts, but even when I shut my eyes, I only see my work.
Right.
But those 10 minutes in that prayer room,
Hmm.
um, I feel severely empowered and
Lovely.
severely rejuvenated and comfortable to take on the new challenges. So
Right.
that's on a philosophical level and on a more deeper level. But generally, my productivity hack, of course, like I talked about sleeping, it's very important, because if you're not rested well, you cannot think well. So very, very critical to do a good job, that you must get good sleep. And lastly, uh, very, very simple one, to create a to-do list and at the end of the day tick them off.
Right.
The whole pride that, oh, I have finished or I
Right.
have accomplished. So the like they say, boon boon se ghada bharta hai. So,
Right.
every day if you're finishing your task, at the
Hmm.
end of the day, at the end of the year, you accomplish quite a lot.
Right. There's a lovely video, I think, by Jeff Bezos, when he's just talking about the fact that where does stress come from? And he says, it's about not knowing the root of the problem. He said,
Correct.
Once you know the problem, and even if I have a long to-do list, that's okay. It could
Precisely.
take me 1 day, 6 months, 1 year. But, it's just about putting the problem into a to-do list, and I think that's
Correct.
where the distress comes from him,
True.
Great.
Oh, true.
And Mitu, what legacy do you hope to leave behind? I mean, how do you want to be remembered for the absolute fabulous and important work that you're doing right now?
I want more than me, I want eminence to be remembered. Uh, and eminence is an outcome of not just me, but my whole team and
Right.
fabulous set of people who are working together. And all of us collectively, I feel we should be remembered for the fantastic, and not, very good quality insight and engagement that we did
Right.
with our clients in helping them protect their most precious asset, that is their reputation.
And tatastu for that, because
Thank
I'm
you.
sure. But Mitu, this was such a fantastic session. I mean, I just learned so much, and I'm sure the viewers on the platform and the people, there were just so many questions I couldn't do justice because, based on the flow of the discussion that we were having. But I really enjoyed this a lot, and wish you the very, very best. And it was great having you on the platform.
Pleasure, Vivek. Wish you good luck too. And thank you for the audience for their patient listening. Thank you for having me, Vivek.
Lovely. Catch
Have
you
a
soon
good
sometime. You too.
Certainly.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.